A 45-year-old man has been charged in a fiery attack on Sunday on demonstrators in Colorado who called for the release of Israeli hostages in Gaza. 12 people were injured in Boulder after what authorities are calling a targeted act of terror. Police say the suspect, Mohammed Sabri Solomon, used a makeshift flamethrower and threw an incendiary device into a crowd. Witnesses say he shouted, quote, "Free Palestine" during the assault. Mr. Solomon now faces multiple state charges of attempted murder, along with a federal hate crime charge. A spokesperson for the Israeli prime minister addressed the Boulder attack.
To Boulder, Colorado, the Prime Minister and the entire state of Israel pray for the full recovery of the wounded in this vicious terror attack that took place in Boulder, Colorado. Israel trusts the American authorities will prosecute the cold-blooded perpetrator to the fullest extent of the law, and will do everything possible to prevent future attacks against innocent civilians. It's very clear by now. These are anti-Semitic attacks, and they're happening around the world. And we are also very clear, and we know that they are a direct result of the blood libels against the Jewish state and its people, and this must be stopped. Hamas invent lies, the media unfortunately repeat them, and the result is Jews attacked, murdered, or with Molotov cocktails thrown at them.
And yesterday, President Trump's press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, put the blame on former President Joe Biden and his administration's immigration policies.
There's a lot of work to do, and the president's hard at it. So why don't I take a few questions?
What can you say to the Jewish community today to ensure that the White House is doing everything they can to keep them safe after the horrific attack in Boulder, and also the 2 Israeli embassy staff who were targeted just last week here in our nation's capital?
Yeah, we have seen 2 horrific cases of anti-Semitic violence in our country in the last 2 weeks, and it is unacceptable to this president and this White House. And rest assured, to all Jewish Americans across our great country, this president has your back, and he's not going to allow anyone to take part in violent terrorism. It's acts of terrorism in our country. And that's what this case in Boulder, Colorado is being investigated as. Kudos to our FBI director, Kash Patel, for immediately calling this a targeted terrorist attack. That's clearly what it was. But I'd also like to point out that this administration has done more than any administration to curb this violence and to curb illegal immigration. We secured our border in record time, but we're also tightening up our visa process and our legal immigration process. And we know that this individual, this terrorist, was allowed into this country by the previous administration, was foolishly given a tourism visa, and then was illegally allowed to stay. These individuals are going to be deported, and we're not going to tolerate such violence in our country.
Andrew Donaldson from OrdinaryTimes.com has more on the attack and the White House's claim.
So this particular news story is going to cross a lot of streams of news stories that we already have in progress, according to the administration and law enforcement officials. This is an individual who came to the country illegally and overstayed his legal status, and his visa was expired. Now, this is actually something that doesn't get talked about as much because it doesn't make a nice, neat buzzword, but a vast, big group of illegal immigrants that are in the country illegally aren't people that just sneak through the desert like on the viral videos that get purported all the time. They're people that come here legally and overstay their visa, or don't keep up with their paperwork, or don't show up for their appointments, or so on and so forth. So this is actually something that plays directly into the illegal immigration narrative that is already ongoing. Now we go to the violence part of it and the targeting specifically of this demonstration and Jewish people. This also plays into the administration's long-running debate over anti-Semitism maneuvers. They've used this for higher education things, places like Harvard and Columbia, as a bit of a cudgel to attack them in other areas as well. And this goes into the global story of Israel-Palestinian conflict we have the video now of the person that's accused of doing this and on video doing this, saying all kinds of things about that. All of these things converge to make a big hot mess. So there's a couple things we got to parse through. Is this an illegal immigrant issue? Well, of course it is. If somebody is kept up, we have a system that is big, broken, there's not enough courts, and when people overstay their welcome, there's not a neat, clean mechanism for finding out where they are, what they're doing. Now, this is a person who has a family, has been here for quite some time, grew up in Kuwait by the statement that he said, and then came here. So the background on this person is going to be interesting because he is a family person. He does have what would otherwise be called a stable life. What radicalized him into wanting to do this? We know what his statements are, but what was the process of going from point A to point B to throwing fire at a group of protesters? Now, there's the wider issue of this is in Western countries, how do you deal with something like this? Now, they're going to jump all over the immigration angle of this, and rightly so. You do have to have secure borders and vet people. But it's also an issue of what do you do with people when you have people saying things like by any means necessary and globalize the intifada? Do you believe them or not? Now, a lot of people in the West may not even understand what those terms really mean, and they may just be saying them. But if they mean it, the end result of those words has to be violence because that's what those words mean. So, how do you parse that out in the West where you have societies that are built on free speech and open protest? These are complicated questions that are really hard to answer. We have a person who did a vile, despicable, violent thing that should be prosecuted to the maximum extent of the law. And underneath that, we need to understand the various issues that converged on this point: illegal immigration, anti-Semitism, the Palestinian-Jewish conflict that has gotten people fired up and driving more and more violence over the years. All these things converged in this one news story. We need to parse them out carefully, but this is politics, and we don't do that. So we're going to do the thing where we buzzword it, and everybody's going to pick out the one little thing they want to focus on.